Dr. Marcus Rhodes had spent 15 years searching for something he couldn't quite define. The archaeological community had written him off as an eccentric, obsessed with patterns that didn't exist. But as he stood in the crystalline chamber 3 kilometers beneath the Atacama Desert, his headlamp illuminating symbols that seemed to shift and dance across the walls, he knew he had been right all along. The chamber shouldn't have existed. The geological surveys had shown solid rock, yet here it was, a perfect dodecahedron carved from what appeared to be a single piece of translucent crystal. The air inside felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike, and carried a faint scent of ozone and something else, something that reminded him of old books and starlight. In the center of the chamber, floating several inches above a crystalline pedestal, was a book, if you could call it a book. Its covers appeared to be made of the same shifting crystal as the walls, but somehow more fluid, more alive. The pages, visible through the translucent cover, seemed to be made of light itself. "Professor Nakamura, you need to see this," Marcus spoke into his radio, his voice trembling with excitement. Static was his only answer. He checked his equipment, everything else was working perfectly. It was just the radio that had gone silent. Marcus approached the book carefully, his scientific training warring with an almost mystical sense of awe. His instruments recorded everything. Temperature steady at 19, 3 degrees C, radiation normal background levels, electromagnetic fields wildly fluctuating. None of it explained what he was seeing. When his fingers finally touched the cover, the world changed. The crystal walls of the chamber became transparent, revealing not solid rock beyond, but what appeared to be an infinite library stretching in all directions. Books of light floated between towering shelves that reached into impossible distances. "You've finally arrived." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Marcus turned to find a figure materializing before him. She appeared humanoid but was clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle crystalline quality, and her hair moved like aurora borealis against a night sky. Her eyes held depths that reminded Marcus of looking into deep space through the Hubble telescope. "I am Valera, keeper of the 7th Archive," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones resonate. "We have been waiting a very long time for someone to find us." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "We? Who are we?" Valera gestured, and the chamber expanded, revealing more clearly the endless library beyond. "We are the archivists. We maintain the accumulated knowledge and stories of 1,000 civilizations across 100 galaxies. And now, Dr. Rhodes, we need your help." She moved closer, her form shifting like light through crystal. "Your world, Earth, it has something unique, something precious. You humans have a capacity for storytelling that we've never encountered before. Your stories, they have power, real power, and there are those who would take that power for themselves." Marcus's scientific mind raced to process what he was seeing and hearing. "Why me? I'm just an archaeologist with some unpopular theories about ancient communication networks." Valera smiled, and it was like watching stars being born. "You were chosen because you could see the patterns. While others dismissed them, you recognized the truth that all stories are connected, that narratives have power beyond mere entertainment. The symbols you've been studying, they're not just ancient communications. They're nodes in a vast network, a library system spanning the cosmos." She touched the floating book and it opened, pages of light spilling into the air around them. "This is just one node, one access point to the greatest repository of knowledge ever created. But it's in danger, Dr. Rhodes. They're coming, the Void Hunters. They've discovered what human stories can do, and they want to harvest that energy for themselves, regardless of the cost to your species." Marcus reached out to touch one of the pages of light, watching in amazement as the symbols transformed into English before his eyes. "What do you need me to do?" "First," Valera said, her expression growing serious, "you need to understand what you're truly part of. Take the book, Dr. Rhodes, read it. Learn who we are, what we protect, and why your world is so important to the balance of all things." As Marcus took the book, its light seemed to flow into him, filling his mind with visions of vast libraries floating in space, of civilizations rising and falling, of stories that could reshape reality itself. He understood then that his life's work had been leading to this moment, this choice. "Will you help us protect the stories?" Valera asked, though she seemed to already know his answer. Marcus looked at the book in his hands, then at the infinite library stretching around him. Everything he'd believed about human history, about the power of narrative, about his own role in the universe. It was all about to change. "Yes," he said, his voice stronger now. "I'll help, but I have so many questions." Valera's smile returned, warming the chamber. "That, Dr. Rhodes, is exactly why you were chosen. The questions you ask, they're the beginning of a new story, one that might just save both our worlds." The crystalline book pulsed with an inner light as Marcus learned to navigate its impossible pages. Each leaf seemed to contain infinite depths, stories within stories, all interconnected in ways that challenged his understanding of reality. Valera stood nearby, her ethereal form shifting like starlight as she guided him through the fundamentals of what she called narrative mechanics. "Every story ever told leaves an energy signature," she explained, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystal walls sing. "But human stories, they're different. They resonate at frequencies that can actually alter the fabric of reality. Your species doesn't just tell stories, you reshape the universe with your narratives." Marcus watched in amazement as she demonstrated, drawing strands of light from the book that formed into complex patterns in the air. Each strand represented a story thread, and where they intersected, new realities bloomed like flowers of light. "The Void Hunters discovered this power decades ago," Valera continued, her expression darkening. "They've been harvesting story energy from less developed worlds for centuries, but when they found Earth—" She paused, the lights around her dimming. "They found a power source unlike anything they'd ever seen." "But why haven't they taken it already?" Marcus asked, his fingers tracing patterns in the light that spilled from the book's pages. "If Earth is such a valuable target, what's stopping them?" Valera gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent again, revealing the vast library beyond. But this time, Marcus saw something new: dark spaces between the shelves, areas where the light seemed to bend and break. "The library network protects worlds that aren't ready for this knowledge. We've been shielding Earth, but our power is waning. The Void Hunters have found ways to corrupt our archives, to turn stories into weapons." As if in response to her words, a tremor ran through the chamber. The crystalline walls vibrated, and for a moment, the infinite library beyond flickered like a failing hologram. Valera's form became momentarily translucent, her expression tightening with concern. "They're getting closer," she whispered. "We don't have much time." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he watched shadows move in the darkness between the distant shelves. "What exactly are these Void Hunters? What do they want?" Valera waved her hand, and images formed in the air, creatures that seemed to be made of living darkness, their forms constantly shifting and changing. "They were once like us, custodians of knowledge, but they discovered that story energy could be harvested, converted into pure power. They became addicted to it, corrupted by it. Now they consume stories, leaving only void behind." The images shifted, showing worlds turned dark and lifeless, their cultures and histories erased. When they take a world's stories, they take everything: its past, its potential futures, its very essence. Earth, with its rich storytelling tradition, would feed them for millennia. Marcus felt sick watching the destruction, but something wasn't adding up. "If they're so powerful, why do they need me? Why show me all this?" Valera's form brightened, hope radiating from her like sunlight through clouds. "Because you're a storyteller yourself, Dr. Rhodes. Your theories about ancient communication networks? You were right, but not in the way you thought. Those patterns you discovered were actually fragments of the library network, echoes of our presence on Earth." She touched the book in his hands, and new pages bloomed from its spine, filling the air with shimmering text. "The network needs human creativity to survive. We can protect your world's stories, but only if we can integrate them properly into the library. That's where you come in." Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger this time. In the distance, Marcus saw entire sections of the library flicker and fade. Valera moved quickly to a crystalline console that had materialized from the wall. "We need to begin your training immediately," she said, her fingers dancing over symbols that burned with inner light. You need to learn how to read the deep stories, how to navigate the narrative streams. The Void Hunters aren't just coming for Earth stories, they're coming for its storytellers. The book in Marcus's hands suddenly felt heavier, more substantial. As he watched, the symbols on its pages began to move, arranging themselves into patterns he somehow understood despite their alien nature. Knowledge flooded his mind, concepts about the nature of reality, the structure of narrative energy, the fundamental connection between consciousness and story. The next few days will change everything you thought you knew about reality, Valera said, placing a crystalline hand on his shoulder. Are you ready to begin? Marcus looked at the book, then at the infinite library with its encroaching shadows, and finally at Valera, her form blazing with determination. He thought about all the stories humanity had ever told, all the dreams and hopes and fears woven into narratives across millennia. They were worth protecting. Teach me, he said firmly. Teach me everything. Valera nodded, and the chamber transformed around them, becoming a space of pure light and possibility. Then let's begin with the first lesson, how to read the stories between stories, the tailies that shape reality itself. Time moved strangely in the crystalline chamber. Marcus had spent what felt like weeks learning to navigate the narrative streams, though his watch insisted only 3 days had passed in the world above. His mind had expanded to comprehend concepts that would have seemed impossible before: the geometric structure of stories, the quantum nature of creativity, the deep grammar that underpinned all conscious thought. But now, as he stood before a wall of shifting light that displayed the current state of Earth's storyweb, his newfound knowledge filled him with dread. Dark tendrils were already infiltrating the network, corrupting stories at their source. They're already here, aren't they? He asked Valera, who materialized beside him, her crystalline form dimmer than usual. The Void Hunters, they've been on Earth all along. Yes, she admitted, her voice carrying a note of ancient sorrow. They've been seeding their influence for decades, preparing humanity for the harvest. Look closer at the patterns. Marcus focused, letting his consciousness expand into the storyweb as Valera had taught him. The dark tendrils resolved into clearer forms, subtle manipulations in media, recurring themes in popular culture, carefully crafted narratives that seemed designed to dampen human creativity and imagination. Social media, he whispered, seeing the pattern emerge. Entertainment algorithms, they're not just tracking our stories, they're shaping them, making them more uniform, more predictable. Valera nodded grimly. The Void Hunters learned from their previous harvests. Instead of taking stories by force, they've found ways to make humanity surrender them willingly. Each time someone chooses empty consumption over creation, the storyweb weakens. A new figure materialized in the chamber, another archivist, but different from Valera. Where she was light and crystal, this one seemed formed from shadows and starlight. I am Nexus, he announced, his voice resonating at frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. And we have discovered something disturbing. Valera's form flickered with surprise. Nexus is the keeper of the first archive, she explained to Marcus. He rarely leaves his post. Nexus raised his hand, and the chamber filled with a new pattern of light, a complex web of connections that seemed to span galaxies. The Void Hunters are not working alone, he said. They have allies among our own kind. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The archivists, but why would they help destroy stories? Power, Nexus replied, his form rippling with barely contained anger. Some believe that by controlling the flow of stories, they can control the shape of reality itself. They see humanity's creative potential as a threat to their authority. The chamber's walls pulsed with urgent light as new information streamed in. Marcus watched in horror as sections of the library network began to go dark, not from Void Hunter corruption, but from deliberate shutdowns. They're isolating Earth, Valera realized, her voice tight with concern, cutting off our access to the network's defensive systems. Marcus's mind raced through the implications, applying his new understanding of narrative mechanics to the problem. Wait, he said, reaching for the crystalline book that had become his constant companion. Show me the pattern of the shutdowns again. The book responded to his touch, its pages flowering with light as it displayed the sequence of library network failures. Marcus traced the pattern with his finger, and a new constellation of connections appeared. "Look," he said urgently. "The shutdowns aren't random. They're creating a shape, a story structure I recognize from Earth's mythological traditions. It's the hero's journey, but inverted. They're not just attacking the network, they're writing a new story into reality itself." Nexus moved closer, his shadowy form analyzing the pattern. "He's right," the ancient archivist confirmed. "They're using humanity's own narrative patterns against us if this story completes its cycle. Earth's creative potential will be locked away forever," Valera finished, her light dimming further. "And humanity will become nothing more than consumers of pre-approved narratives, their story energy harvested in perpetuity." Marcus felt a surge of anger, not just at the Void Hunters, but at the archivists who had chosen to betray their own purpose. There has to be a way to stop this. Every story has its counterpoint, its opposition. "Yes," Nexus said, a note of hope entering his resonant voice. "But it would require something unprecedented, a fusion of archivist knowledge and human creativity, a new kind of story that could rewrite the rules themselves." Valera turned to Marcus, her crystalline features set with determination. "That's why you're here. You understand both worlds now, the mathematical precision of our library network and the wild creativity of human storytelling. You can bridge the gap." The chamber rumbled, and through its walls, Marcus saw more sections of the infinite library fade to darkness. They were running out of time. "I'll need help," he said, his mind already beginning to form a plan. "Not just from the archivists, but from Earth. If we're going to write a new story into reality, we need more voices, more perspectives." "That would mean revealing our existence," Nexus warned. "Breaking the oldest laws of the library." "The laws are already broken," Valera countered. "And Marcus is right, humanity deserves the chance to fight for its own stories." Marcus opened the crystalline book again, its pages now filling with a new kind of light, not just the pure radiance of archivist knowledge, but the chaotic, vibrant energy of human creativity. "Then let's write something they won't expect," he said. "A story about stories themselves, about the power of creation over consumption, about the right of all beings to tell their own tales." As the three figures bent over the book, beginning to weave their unprecedented narrative, the shadows between the library shelves seemed to writhe with anticipation. The real battle was about to begin, and its outcome would determine the creative fate of not just Earth, but all storytelling civilizations in the cosmos. The return to Earth's surface felt like waking from a dream, except Marcus knew he was walking into a nightmare. The crystalline book, now disguised as an ordinary laptop, hummed with power in his backpack. Valera's presence lingered in his mind, a shimmer of starlight at the edge of his consciousness, while Nexus's dark energy pulsed through the communication crystal in his pocket. Professor Nakamura was waiting where Marcus had left her 3 days ago, though she looked like she'd aged years. "Rhodes," she said, her voice tight with concern, "where have you been, and what happened to our radios?" Marcus took a deep breath, remembering Valera's warning about how to proceed. "Junko," he said carefully, "what if I told you that every story humanity has ever told is alive, and there are beings out there who want to steal them?" To his surprise, Nakamura didn't laugh or dismiss him. Instead, she pulled out her tablet and showed him what she'd discovered during his absence. On the screen, waves of unusual energy readings pulsed across the globe, concentrating around major population centers. "Something's happening to the internet," she explained. "Social media, streaming services, news sites, they're all showing patterns I've never seen before. It's like—" She hesitated, searching for words. "Like someone's rewriting reality," Marcus finished. "Junko, I need you to gather every storyteller, writer, and creative mind you trust. We're going to need them all." Over the next 48 hours, Marcus's small archaeological team transformed into the nucleus of something larger. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a quantum computing specialist who'd been studying pattern anomalies in global data networks, arrived first. Then came Kai Chen, a folklore expert who'd noticed ancient stories literally disappearing from cultural memory. They gathered in Marcus's makeshift command center, a converted warehouse filled with screens displaying the growing corruption in Earth's story web. The crystalline book, now revealed in its true form, floated above a central pedestal, projecting images of the library network's continuing collapse. The Void Hunters aren't just taking our stories, Alina explained, pointing to her data models. They're replacing them with hollow versions, narratives that look similar but lack the spark of real creativity, and people are choosing these versions willingly. Because they're easier, Kai added, his face illuminated by the book's ethereal light. No challenge, no complexity, just pure consumption, the perfect trap. Marcus nodded, feeling Valera's presence strengthen as she materialized beside him, visible now to his assembled team. Their gasps of awe were cut short by Nexus's simultaneous appearance, his shadowy form making the warehouse's shadows dance. "We've identified the primary nodes," Nexus announced, his voice resonating through the space. "The Void Hunters have established 17 major story drains across Earth's network. Each one is guarded by a corrupted archivist." Valera gestured, and a global map appeared in the air, marking the locations with points of dark light. "The story drains are connected. If we can disrupt enough of them simultaneously, we might be able to break their hold on Earth's narrative field." "But we'll need to fight story with story," Marcus added, turning to his team. "Each of us will need to create something new, something unexpected. The Void Hunters can corrupt existing narratives, but they can't predict truly original creation." Alina's fingers flew across her keyboard as she integrated the archivist's data with her own models. "If we can boost the signal from independent creators, small storytellers, anyone making something genuine." She paused, her eyes widening at the possibilities. "We'd create a feedback loop," Kai finished excitedly. "Real stories inspiring more real stories, building enough creative energy to overload their system." The crystalline book pulsed with approval, its pages shifting to display the mathematical probability of success. The numbers weren't encouraging, but they weren't impossible either. Suddenly, the warehouse's shadows deepened, and a chill filled the air. On every screen, streams of data began to corrupt, turning to static. Valera's form flickered as she turned to Marcus in alarm. "They know," she said urgently. "They've detected our planning. The Void Hunters are accelerating their timeline." Through the warehouse windows, Marcus watched in horror as the night sky began to change. Stars winked out one by one, replaced by an unnatural void that seemed to swallow light itself. Around the globe, according to Alina's instruments, people were falling into a kind of trance, their minds drawn into endless streams of empty content. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, feeling the weight of billions of stories hanging in the balance. "Hours," Nexus replied grimly, "maybe less." Marcus looked at his team, at the humans who had chosen to believe in something impossible, to fight for the right to tell their own stories. He thought of all the tales yet to be told, all the creativity waiting to burst forth from minds not yet born. "Then we start now," he declared, opening the crystalline book to a new page. "Everyone find your story, something true, something that matters to you. We're going to remind humanity why we tell stories in the first place." As his team scattered to their positions, each carrying a fragment of the book's power, Marcus felt the first tremors of the coming battle shake the earth. Above them, the void continued to spread across the sky, hungry for the light of human creativity. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher, not just Earth stories, but the very future of human imagination hung in the balance. The void above was absolute now, a perfect darkness that consumed even the memory of stars. In Marcus's warehouse command center, 17 screens showed 17 cities where the story drains pulsed with terrible power, drawing the creative essence from millions of minds. The crystalline book trembled on its pedestal, its pages flickering between light and shadow as reality itself began to waver. "The first story drain is about to reach critical mass," Alina announced, her voice tight with tension as she monitored the global network. "Once it does, the others will follow in a cascade. We'll lose everything." Marcus felt Valera's presence pulse with urgency beside him. The archivist's crystalline form had grown so dim he could barely see her. Across the room, Nexus was little more than a deeper shadow among shadows. "Our connection to the library network is almost gone," Valera warned. "Once it fails completely, we won't be able to channel enough power to fight back." But Marcus had been preparing for this moment. "We don't need the network," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We just need to remind people how to tell their own stories." He activated the emergency broadcast system they'd spent the last hours setting up. Around the world, small teams of creators waited for his signal. Each carried a shard of the crystalline book, each ready to tell a story that was uniquely their own. "Now," Marcus commanded, and pressed his hand to the book's cover. The warehouse filled with light as 17 voices began to speak, to sing, to create. In Tokyo, an elderly woman told her grandchildren about the day she first fell in love. In Lagos, a street artist painted impossible dreams in colors that didn't exist before. In Sao Paulo, a child wrote her first story in crayon, each word blazing with potential. On the screens, Marcus watched the story drains falter as new narratives burst into existence. Not mass-produced content, but real stories, raw and powerful and alive. The Void Hunter's carefully constructed network began to buckle under the surge of genuine creativity. "It's working," Elena shouted over the rising hum of energy. "The corruption is receding in multiple nodes." But then the shadows in the warehouse began to move, taking form. The corrupted archivists had arrived, their once crystalline bodies now twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. Behind them came the Void Hunters themselves, beings of such perfect emptiness that reality shuddered around them. "You cannot stop the harvest," they spoke in unison, their voices like silence given sound. "Humanity chooses us. They prefer our empty stories to the challenge of creation." "No," Marcus countered, standing his ground as darkness crept toward him. "We choose creation. We choose to tell our own stories even when it's harder, even when it hurts." He opened the crystalline book one final time, and into its pages he poured everything, his memories, his dreams, his fears, his hopes. Around the world, others did the same, feeding their stories into the network not as commodities to be consumed, but as gifts to be shared. The warehouse became a battlefield of light and shadow. Valera and Nexus fought alongside human storytellers, their combined power pushing back against the Void. But the Void Hunters were strong, strengthened by centuries of stolen stories. In that moment of crisis, Marcus understood what needed to be done. "The book," he gasped, reaching for it even as darkness closed around him. "It's not just a key to the library network, it's a story itself, the first story, the one that makes all other stories possible." Before anyone could stop him, he pressed both hands against the book's crystal covers and began to read it backwards, unpicking the very fabric of reality. Light exploded from the pages, and with it came understanding. The Void Hunters weren't their true enemy. The real threat was the belief that stories could be owned, controlled, consumed rather than created. As this truth resonated through the network, the corrupted archivists began to change, their twisted forms returning to pure crystal and light. "The story drains," Elena called out. "They're transforming, they're becoming." Creation points. Where the drains had been, new wells of creative energy were forming. The void above began to recede, and stars returned, not just the old ones, but new constellations shaped by human imagination. As the light returned, Marcus saw that both humanity and the library network had been transformed. The barriers between them had dissolved, creating something entirely new. A living story web that belonged to everyone and no one, where every voice could contribute to the great narrative of existence. Valera, her form now blazing with renewed power, smiled at Marcus. "You've done it," she said. "You've written a new ending." "No," Marcus replied, watching as the crystalline book's pages filled with infinite possibility. "We've written a new beginning." Around the world, people were waking up not from a trance, but to a new awareness of their own creative power. Stories began to flow freely again, not as products to be consumed, but as living things to be shared and cherished. The Void Hunters, faced with this transformation, found themselves changing too. Without the drive to consume and control, they became something else. Listeners, witnesses to the endless creativity of a universe where every being was both reader and writer of reality's ongoing story. Marcus looked at his team, at the crystalline book now pulsing with combined human and archivist energy, at the stars above writing new patterns across the sky. He understood then that this wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the first chapter of humanity's next great story.